Hey everybody, it's Adam from Loose Pixel, and welcome back. Throughout the course of my career, teaching, YouTubing, working as a director, working as a professional artist for over 2 decades now, I've had the opportunity to work with many different artists, to teach many artists, to direct many artists, and to have many artists as colleagues professionally. And I have noticed quite clearly that there are trends in artists' personalities, in their work ethic, that most of the time directly translate into how much success they have or don't. I'm going to break it down into 3 simple points, and hopefully it'll serve as a bit of a beginning point, a launching pad, a point of reflection on where you are in your career, beginner, intermediate, or seasoned pro, and maybe help offer you a little guidance on where you could spend a little bit more time and energy to help fill the gaps if necessary. And I think one of the key primary personality traits that artists who struggle to find work very often fall into is that you don't necessarily have a healthy relationship with self-criticism. That you might be getting feedback from a colleague, from a friend, from a loved one, a fellow artist, and or a teacher or a director. Since I founded my mentorship 15 years ago or so, and since I've worked as a director, I have consistently noted that artists who tend to grow the fastest, who tend to have the best reputations professionally, and find their footing and stable careers, are the ones that tend to have a very open and inviting personality when it comes to constructive feedback. And I mean constructive as in somebody who has your best intentions in mind, and they're not just being douchebags and insulting your work. Of course, nobody should put up with that. But you're open to constructive feedback. And furthermore, when you receive what could potentially be very healthy, helpful feedback, you don't make excuses. And this is quite noticeable in people's personalities. Some people are very defensive or fragile when it comes to a professional trying to let you know what the shortcomings are in your work. Let's say, for instance, you haven't necessarily gotten a grasp on perspective. So when your teacher or your director, usually a teacher in this context, says your perspective's a little bit off, sometimes you can get away with a little bit of loose perspective, but in this case, I think it really stands out. That bookshelf looks really, really crooked. And it's clear to the teacher, because you're a little bit more of a beginner artist, that you're still wrapping your brain around what is an arguably very complicated thing for your brain to decode for the first time. It's one of the hardest things to overcome as a beginner artist. But the artist responds with, yeah, well, I don't like to be too strict with my perspective because it really restricts my creative freedom. Now, that argument, that comeback might, under normal circumstances, if you're speaking to a professional, be perfectly viable. Maybe you're somebody who's exploring cubism or surrealism. Maybe you're trying to break the rules of perspective to communicate something more profound. As a professional, as somebody who has already proven they are very capable and understand the concepts of perspective, but are deliberately fiddling with those rules for a more important reason, for a more personal reason. But to a beginner, you need to fix your perspective. You have 0 drawings proving the fact that you know how to draw perspective well, because, understandably, it's tough. It requires work. But from a professional trying to give you professional advice, if you do intend on working professionally, if you do intend on pursuing this as a career and hopefully one day making a stable salary from that, you're not fooling anybody. We know it's hard. It was hard for us. It was hard for everybody else I've ever taught. It was hard for everybody in my class when I was studying in college and university, when I first started taking classes. It's hard, but it's necessary. And by saying, I don't like restrictive guidelines because I like to express myself freely, that's fine and dandy when you're drawing on your own, in your closet, where nobody can see you. But the moment you're sharing your work with the public, the moment you're sharing your work in a professional setting, that doesn't fly anymore. That would be the same thing as me trying to hire somebody to fix the electricity in my house. And I say, have you ever taken any courses in electrical engineering? And they're like, nah, I don't want to bog myself down with that kind of stuff. Just let me express myself freely. Well, no, because I don't want you to burn my house down. And I also don't want you to make my artistic project or my game fail because you don't feel like following the rules. So those rules are in there for a reason. They help you to communicate more fluidly to your audience, depending on the style of work that you do. A good example of this would be anatomy. And I'm guilty of this too. Back in the beginning of my career, when I started getting into character design and animation, and I only got into creature design a little bit later on, I was afraid of anatomy. It was a subject that really, it intimidated me. So I put it off, probably for a little longer than it should. And I managed to make my way pretty far into my education, but not very far into my professional career, not having a solid grasp of anatomy. I avoided it because I was afraid of it. And so long as I avoided it, my drawings were weak, or they weren't nearly as strong as they could be. And that lack of credibility in my designs when anatomy was required, it showed. And it was a bit of a thorn in my side emotionally. I felt like it was a weakness. It was an avoidance. And that impacted my self-esteem in a negative way. When I finally sat down to learn, and I said, Adam, if you want to be taken seriously as an artist, you need to, and if you want to work professionally as an artist, you're going to have to buckle down and learn this stuff. And I learned it. I didn't only learn it, and it didn't only help me gain the confidence I wanted when it came to doing these kinds of designs, but I ended up falling in love with it because I realized that anatomy was one of the most fascinating things to know. Furthermore, one of the most powerful tools to creating characters and creatures. And once I started getting a solid grasp of it, and when I started getting to animal anatomy and all these different types of things, it started to become an incredibly powerful creative tool. But the only reason I didn't learn was because I was too much of a chicken. And I work with a lot of artists that are afraid to admit the fact that they're weak at something and they need to fix it. If your colors are too saturated, if they don't harmonize, you need to harmonize them. And whether or not you have some personal reason why you want to keep it that way, well, fine, keep it that way. But don't expect anybody else to enjoy your work. It's the same way I don't enjoy listening to music if it's somebody who doesn't know how to achieve harmony with their sound. It's the same thing when it comes to colors. You need to learn. And if you don't know it and it's something that's important to your career, then you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your career to just do it. The second part of this same point is the ability to distinguish between objectivity and self-deprecation. And a lot of you, even a lot of you who listen and comment, are guilty of this as well. I very often read comments from people who insult themselves a lot, or they regard feedback as an insult. And that's not a healthy attitude to have if you want to be a professional. In no attempts to call anybody out here, because we're all guilty of this, all of it, myself included. But I'll very often read comments from people who say, I suck at this, or I'm terrible at that, or I'm pathetic when it comes to this, or, I give up on this, blah, 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 blah. A lot of being fed up, a lot of blaming yourself for being bad is not helpful. It's not going to help your career. What it's going to do is it's going to weigh you down. It's going to intentionally or unintentionally program you to hate what you do. And that's not what criticism and that's not what feedback should do. Feedback should be honest, sometimes direct, perhaps there might be a little abrasive, but it should not discourage you. And if you have a professional attitude when it comes to feedback, not only from others, but to yourself, it should be eye-opening, it should be informative, and if you have a very healthy relationship with feedback, it should be inspiring and exciting. I mean, at no age, at no experience level are you immune to feedback. I'm a professional who's been doing it for many years, and I sometimes get feedback from people who are not even artists that have a really, really good point. And I go, you know what? I never thought of it that way. Let me give it a look. In fact, I would argue that very often some of the best feedback that I get on my art is from people who don't draw, because they represent my average audience, non-professionals who are just reacting to my work in a very honest and objective way. So I take all of that to heart. But when it crosses the line and it becomes insulting, then I say, hey, are you trying to help me or hurt me here? Because you're just making me feel bad. Which most people do, by the way, because most people aren't cruel. And or if I'm doing that to myself, then you need to check yourself and say, is what I'm telling myself actually going to help me grow? Or is it contributing to me feeling exhausted, worn out, and discouraged at the end of the day? And if necessary, make the change. And as the last point, the last part of this point, which kind of piggybacks off the last point, is you need to understand the power, not only for yourself, but also outwardly, of having a positive demeanor. People who get hired are people who have a proactive, positive, healthy, and friendly personality. And it's remarkable how many people don't realize that being a whiner, being somebody who complains all the time, somebody who questions authority all the time and says, why are you making me do this and what do you want from me? Or if I'm working with a student and they, very seldom, but they might once in a while kind of have a whatever, I don't care, I don't take this shit seriously anyways kind of attitude. They don't realize how that really negatively impacts their education, it negatively impacts their professional career, and furthermore, it can have a very damaging impact on your hireability or your ability to sustain a job. One of the things I tell my students very often is there's a few very important criteria, kind of a checklist you need to go through to know what kind of a career to pursue. And when a director is hiring you for something, when a director is going through that checklist of things that they need to check off to know whether or not you're a good candidate for a job, all of those are fine and dandy. But when that director calls you in for a job interview, they're not calling you in for a job interview to find out whether or not you can draw. A director is never going to call you if they don't know that you're already technically qualified. The one major reason why you're called in for a job interview on Zoom or in person is to find out whether or not you're a jerk, to find out whether or not you question authority, to find out whether or not you have a team-oriented mindset, and whether or not you just want to be the lone star. Do you think you're better than everybody else? Do you not think it necessary to smile and be kind to somebody? Are you the type of person who asks why when somebody says they need something from you? Are you the type of person who doesn't bother to smile and just be generally kind? Well, you'd be surprised how many times I've sat down to give an interview as a director when I was working for companies like EA, for instance, where that artist was very well cut for the job technically. They had the skill, but when I sat down with them for 10-15 minutes and had an interview with them, they were so antisocial, they were so unkind and or aggressive and competitive with me. I walked out of that interview room telling myself, I'd be damned if I was going to hire a jerk like that. Jesus, that was uncomfortable. Because one of the main things a director is trying to find out during the job interview is, can I spend 40 hours with this person? If you're friendly, if you're sociable, if you're chatty, if you're kind but introverted, if you're a little awkward but you mean well, then you're fine. But if you're a jerk, if you're antisocial, if you're cold, if you're minimalist with how you talk and you don't feel like sharing much, you just want to do your job and keep your face in your book, chances are people aren't going to want to work with you because you're a bit of a downer, right? And remember that when you're working in a studio or just working with a client, you want that experience to be a pleasant one. So never underestimate the power of kindness. A smile, a friendly handshake, listening to people, laughing at their jokes, things like that, they go a long way. And if the director has to decide whether or not to hire somebody because they're technically a little bit stronger or strong enough but really, really nice, the person who's really nice usually is the one who's going to get the job. The next important point is you have to have a clear set goal. This is very important. And this is something that very often younger beginner artists tend to struggle with a little bit for understandable reasons. You've just spent several years, 3, 6 or more years in school, building a portfolio, doing assignments, learning about all these different fundamentals, these different principles and stuff like that. But one of the things that a lot of artists don't realize is the fundamentals that apply in education don't directly translate necessarily into a job, meaning you're not expected to be a master of everything when you start working professionally. More importantly, you need to be very good at the things that pertain to your job. So when a director, I'll put myself in this situation, when I was a director looking at different portfolios, it was very clear that art portfolios that tried to be jacks of all trades, just showing everything, watercolor paintings, charcoal landscape drawings, gesture drawings, anatomy drawings, logo design, graphic design, vehicle design, props, characters, everything. And then some was 2D, some was 3D. It was kind of all over the place. And I'm sure there's many of you that are going to admit to having this in your portfolios as well in the comments. Quite confident of that. That to a director means this artist is still trying to figure themselves out. Now, if this is a studio job that they're just looking for more of an entry-level job, it's nothing too demanding, and they're willing to give opportunities to younger artists, which is where I got my first opportunities. So that definitely happens. You can still get a job with a portfolio like that. Once you've got your feet grounded working professionally, you'll see that as time progresses, as you get more into the intermediate level professional, that wishy-washy, all over the place type of portfolio is going to start doing more harm than good. And when the director looks at that work, even if they do see something that they like, if that's in the same portfolio with 20, 30 other drawings that are completely different styles and different mediums and everything like that, that's a red flag to a director that you're still trying to figure yourself out and you don't have a lot of experience doing what you're doing. And I know this can be a little bit of a controversial topic because there are some professionals out there, depending on the niche that they advocate for, or at least the ones that they're known for, be it design or concept art or fine art. Some professionals, even YouTubers out there, might say you need to have a diverse portfolio to make yourself more employable. There is truth in that, so long as that diversity is focused on a certain niche type of job. So for instance, if you're working in a concept art job for a certain type of studio, and that studio has many different types of projects, and that might require a little bit of diversity, then maybe, being able to adapt yourself to slightly different projects is one thing. But generally speaking, this is far less the case. More often than not, you're looking for somebody who does something consistently and does it really well. And when a director sees enough examples of a consistent quality of work within a consistent type of theme and style, that gives the director confidence that you know what you're doing, you love what you're doing, and you do it frequently and you have a lot of practice, making you immediately employable. I know I can hire Brenda today to do it, and I know she'll be more or less good to go, unless she might need a little assistance. She might need a little assistance from senior artists, but she's more or less good to go. But if I look at an overly diverse portfolio, That's very often when directors might ask for an art test, which not everybody feels is an ethical thing. But the only reason why you'd get an art test is because the director did see some potential in your work. They do need somebody fairly desperately, and they need stronger evidence that you can handle a specific type of job. Now, if that director asks you to do something that doesn't reflect anything in your portfolio, in my opinion, that's a sign of an amateur director. Because as a director, you should never have to ask somebody to do something they're completely unfamiliar with. I would never ask somebody who does a Blizzard style of art to do From Software style of art. Those are two completely different types of artists that require many years of training to adapt to. So if I was to hire somebody just based off of the premise that they're, quote, good, even if they're not compatible with the studio that I'm hiring for, that's a sign that I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. And if you do an art test, chances are you're going to fail it. And if I do hire you on those pretenses, chances are you're going to fail at your job and you're going to feel like shit and you're going to blame yourself. And I would argue that this is both people's fault. It's your fault for applying somewhere you're not qualified, and it's the director's fault for hiring you in the first place when they should know better. To piggyback off of that last point, the second part of the second point is that you clearly understand what's required of you in your desired job. It's important that you, as an aspiring professional or as a working professional, that whenever you apply to a certain job, you have to do a little bit of homework first. The very common mistake that a lot of artists make is that they just feel that they have to be good. And if they're good enough, then people will start hiring them. You can waste a lot of time and energy applying to dozens and dozens of places. Guilty as charged. I did this for years. That you burn yourself out applying and applying and applying, writing up CVs, cover letters, writing tailored messages to directors, to studios, HR, showing up in person, putting on your best face, all that kind of stuff. And people just ghost you. I got ghosted for years. I applied to dozens and dozens of places. Just hiring anywhere where I saw the word artist connected to it. And I would say 1 out of every 30 or 40 applications even got responded to. And out of those, 5% of those gave me a job. So the ROI, the return on investment when it came to my efforts, was very, very low. Fast forward, understanding what my client's looking for, assessing whether or not I have a compatibility with that on a personal and professional level, and applying to very targeted studios that I feel I'm a good fit for, changed that around dramatically for me. Once I had a good sense of who I was artistically, and I knew where I was going artistically, and I was applying to the right type of places, and I understood the demand of that studio, and my portfolio demonstrated that I had the qualifications to relieve them of any stresses, that I could get that job done, all of a sudden I started getting calls back. Furthermore, because I had such a well-tailored portfolio for a certain type of work that showed that I knew what I was doing and understood what that director was looking for, I started getting calls from people who I wasn't even applying to. Because when you become very good at your job, word gets around and you start getting recommended to different people. And I would sometimes get a random email message on ArtStation or Instagram, or a personal email from somebody saying, hey, I discovered you online and we're looking for somebody for this type of job. Would you be interested? Or a friend of mine recommended you because they felt you would be really, really qualified for this type of job because this tends to be your strength. You start to find more opportunities. So there's a bit of a domino effect. As you get better, as you gain that experience, you start to gain a certain type of professional momentum where opportunities start to present themselves more and more. Now, of course, we go through recessions, there's frictions in the job market, there are scares or insecurities in the job market, studios lay people off, and there's less jobs. That's a reality for every human being on the planet, artist or non-artist. But generally speaking, if you want to have the best chances possible, you need to know who you're applying to. So don't just send your CVs and portfolios out willy-nilly. Do some homework. Research them online. If you can see personal interviews with directors that work in certain departments for certain projects that you're applying to, it's worth listening to them. Getting to know what their tone is like. Getting to know what their focus is like. Pay attention to the keywords that they use. What's their priorities? How are they trying to present themselves to the studio? Okay, I'll give an example of something random. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to do a desk setup tour video for a company who I just bought a lot of nice stuff from a company called, I have this company in Montreal called Ergonoffice that do these beautiful desks and desk trays. Not sponsored. I bought all this stuff myself. They're a local company. Let's say I wanted to do a setup video, a desk setup video for my artist setup. Before I approach them to offer my YouTuber platform to promote their stuff and maybe do some kind of a sponsorship with them, I first have to watch what kind of videos that they produce. What kind of videos which YouTubers do Ergonoffice tend to send free products to? What kind of tone do they have? How do they present themselves? So if I wanted to do something like that, maybe I would look at Maisie Lee's videos. This young woman who does a lot of cozy desk setup tours with her matcha latte and her nice gentle voice and her relaxing bossa nova music in the background. Or I look at somebody else. Oh, he's also got a very chill vibe. She's got a chill vibe. How aesthetic are they? How do they present it? Are they focusing more on the productivity side of things? Or are they focusing more on the mood and the atmosphere side of things? And by understanding that, if and when I were to approach them personally and say, hey, I'd like to do videos with you, if they look at my videos that I have RGB gamer setups with flashy lights, they're never going to respond, will they? Even though I have a really balling setup, even though it looks really cool, I don't match their brand. And remember that if a studio knows themselves well, they know what their brand is, and you need to know what their brand is. So when you communicate to them, you are presenting them with art and a mood and a personality that matches their brand. Makes sense, doesn't it? This last point is what I would call the, quote, gear check of working as a professional artist. Gear check being a gaming term for this is where your skills are put to the test, right? You might have kind of been able to wing it up until this point. When you get to this boss, they're going to kick your ass unless you've got your shit in order, right? If you're playing a Dark Souls game, that's the first NPC you encounter as soon as you start the game. Gear check is immediate, right? But when it comes to working professionally, I think that one of the things that artists need to get over, they need to develop a bit of resilience with, is the ability to recognize and address your own weaknesses, even if they hurt your ego. And it's very clear that many artists who, it kind of ties into the first point I made, sometimes you have professional feedback for them and you're saying, hey, if you want to work professionally, if this is your goal, you need to get good at that. And if they're willing to do that, a little bit of the hard work, if they're willing to say, hey, okay, if I want to get somewhere, I need to be able to overcome this. I need to be able to master this. It's going to be a bit fatiguing. It's not my favorite subject in the world. I don't enjoy it all the time, but I know it's necessary of me. If I don't do this, I won't be able to progress. It's like that boss you just can't kill unless you get your skill in check. And if you don't, then quit the game, because you're never gonna progress past a certain point otherwise. A point that matters, and a point that can give you a lot of growth. It can help your employability, your sustainability, your salary, and so forth. And if you're willing to say, okay, I suck at this and I need to fix it, and I know that this is required of me to get my dream job, the sooner you get over that, and the sooner you discipline yourself to be able to sit down and say, I know this is not the most fun work in the world, but I've got to do it. You have my word. You're going to start seeing the way people respond to your work professionally improve. But most importantly, you're going to start seeing your attitude towards yourself change as well. Because as professionals, we need to be able to feel that emotional reward of overcoming ourselves, of being able to tell ourselves that we are capable of doing something now that we didn't think we were capable of doing before. And it's one of those things that I know that as a kid, when I was growing up, I would see the works of these amazing artists that I completely adored, like the Frank Frazettas, for instance. I would look at work by Frank Frazetta or John Howe or Alan Lee or Brian Froud, a lot of those fantasy illustrators that I just looked at their work and I went, or Magic the Gathering artists or Dungeons and Dragons artists. I would look at the art in my monstrous compendium, my D&D monstrous compendium, and think to myself, only the gods are capable of that. I couldn't even fathom how a human being could create something like that. As I got older, I got better. It still felt unfathomable to me. Even when I was in my late teens, I would look at the works by, magic art or fantasy illustrations and things like that, and I thought, I haven't the vaguest clue how they do that. It's just so amazing. It's a skill I'll never attain. No, you can attain it. You absolutely can become that master artist you want. And the ones who do achieve that, who even start to forge a professional path in that direction, are the ones who are capable of looking at themselves and saying, this is going to require hard work. Art's not easy. It's not. It requires a lot of discipline. It requires my ability to do things that I might not necessarily want to do all the time. And the healthier relationship you have with hard work, and furthermore, addressing your weaknesses objectively, not self-deprecation. Self-deprecation's not helpful, but just objectively and constructively, the faster you'll grow and the greater opportunity you have for achieving even greater successes than you thought were possible. That you can find yourself one day regarded as one of the greats. And when you look at those great artists, they didn't become great just because, some deity, some higher power granted them with a gift. No, it's because they got back up on that skateboard and they kept trying over and over and over and over and over and over again. Even though they broke bones and got bruises, they kept going until eventually they could do something they couldn't do. And furthermore, what a lot of other people can't do as well. In fact, one of my favorite things I remember hearing was the sign of a true professional is when somebody is capable of doing something that nobody else is willing to do, that they're willing to push themselves further than other people are. And any one of my greatest achievements in my career have always been those times where I gear checked myself and I said, Adam, you can't keep doing the same shit every day. You need to grow. You need to go somewhere. You're never going to progress in your career unless you get better, unless you push yourself, unless you get better in a healthy way, of course. Don't burn yourself out, right? But every single time I buckled down and I said, just do the work, Adam. I got better. My artwork improved, and so did my career. Now, because you're such an amazing person and an amazing listener, I'm going to offer you a bonus tip. And this one's geared specifically at seasoned professionals. And that is, know who you are, understand your brand, your style, your focus, and your career path. Have confidence in what you do. But don't forget to listen to your audience. Within reason. Within reason. What I mean by that, I've worked with professionals who were so well established that every single time anybody offered them advice, they ignored it. They said, yeah, okay, but that's not what my point is. And at the same time, these same artists, not all of them, but these same artists would also complain that they were really having a hard time gaining popularity or getting more jobs or growing their career. And they were coming to me, to my mentorship, to learn how to overcome that. And I very often found that some of the most resistant artists out there were the ones who were professional because they felt they knew better. Now, of course, I know that when I'm working with a professional as a teacher, I need to address it very differently. I'm not just teaching basic fundamentals. It's really about me understanding that artist's specific tailored needs and be able to help them to fill a gap where they feel they might need it, to the best of my ability, of course. But very often, not always, very often that's met with resistance. And I found that artists that weren't only really good and did manage to find some professional success, but you could see had the potential for greatness, not just good enoughness, but greatness. were the ones who were always also good listeners. A really good example of just such a person, who's not actually even an illustrator, he's a singer and a musician, Jacob Collier, who's known as, quote, the musician's musician, one of the most celebrated musical geniuses, so they say, of all time. I watched his interview when he was talking to Simon Sinek, one of my personal favorite human beings on the planet. I've read all of his books and I watch his stuff all the time. I really love him to pieces. Simon Sinek. As much as I was appreciating the back and forth conversation between Simon and Jacob, what I was paying attention to particularly was how both of them were exceptionally good listeners. Jacob was really listening. He was really responding. He was really curious about what Simon had to share, and vice versa. And it became this incredibly lovely collaborative conversation where you could tell they were both walking away with true value from each other. Despite Jacob's incredible success and his incredible popularity, he really is in his prime of primes. He is incredibly receptive to feedback. And I would argue that it's his openness to listening, the fact that he's such a good listener and a good learner of his audience, that contributes so much to his success and his growth as an artist, because he really gets his audience. He understands them. He listens to them. I listen to you all the time as a YouTuber who's been doing this for well over a decade, that if I only do what's good for me and I don't listen to you, if I only do what's good for the algorithm and I don't listen to you, sure, yeah, I might be able to get more clicks by shit-talking some other artist. Artists do it all the time. There's other art channels that love to do nothing more than just try to destroy the reputations of other artists because it's dramatic and because it's clickbaity and because it allows people to bitch and complain. If I did that, I would be potentially getting a lot more clicks. I'd get a lot of hate for doing that, but I don't give a shit because I'm getting paid. So I don't care what you think because you're not the one paying my bills. YouTube is, right? And I might get a lot of views and a lot of infamy for that kind of thing. I could be super popular by doing videos that just piss everybody off or talk shit about other people. But then I'm not doing that because you asked me to. I'm doing it because I have selfish motives. I'm doing it because my channel hasn't been getting a whole lot of views and I know this kind of stuff gets a lot of attention. But the reason I do these videos, the reason why I'm doing this, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because you told me this matters to you. This video, what I'm sharing with you, these weekly videos that I share with you, is because you told me that they bring you a lot of value. And that's something that I can stand behind because I think it's an ethical way to share my life with you. It's a way that I can pay it forward, that I've had the ability to be able to enjoy this career of mine. I'm not just going to I'm not going to lock myself up in my bank vault and count my bills. No, it's that I sit down with you. We sit down in the mud together, as Simon Sinek would say. Every week, we sit in the mud together and we share in the drama of an art career together. The good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And as a professional, you need to sit in the mud with your audience. Whether it's an audience that comes to see your work in galleries, whether it's an audience who follows you on YouTube, if it's an audience that shares and shows likes and dislikes on your Instagram feed or your TikTok, whatever it is, you have to sit in the mud with them because you are in this together. And if you don't realize that, then don't be surprised when people don't pay attention to you. It's your job as a professional to pay attention to them first. Okay? Now, since you stuck it all the way to the end, first of all, thank you very much. I'm very happy you're still here. And to thank you for this, I'm going to teach you the Polish phrase of the week. Not just to teach you, but to teach myself as well, because I owe it to myself to learn, having a Polish family. And the phrase is nie wiedziałem, że. Nie wiedziałem, że, which means I didn't know that. So if you say, for instance, nie wiedziałem, że means I didn't know that, ... And then you fill in the phrase with a Polish phrase that I can't speak yet, but I will one day. So, nie wiedziałam, że. is the phrase of the week. I didn't know that. So write "Nie wiedziałam że" in the comments below, just to show me that you've stuck it out all the way to the end. And of course, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.